time. So hey, we've got for you a full week planned of. I know most of us are still sitting, sequestered in our houses under quarantine, but it's getting close. It's getting close to that time where we can extend our walks in the neighborhood. We can get out and maybe see somebody else's neighborhood, check out a new cul-de-sac, and maybe by the end of the summer, even travel a little bit. So we wanted to talk about that today, and we've brought on a couple of special guests this week. The first guest is going to be one of our friends of ZEISS, I call them, photographer Brandon Cunningham. He's a terrific photographer, has done a tremendous amount of photography during travel, and he's going to talk to us about what he keeps in his kit, how he gets his signature look, and then also maybe we might even talk about doing black and white in Morocco. He's done a terrific bunch of photography for that as well. Also today is our ZEISS Ambassador Tracy Page, one of our favorites, here today with us. She's going to help lead this conversation and talk about some tips and tricks that she might have as well. And well, welcome. So welcome everybody. Glad to have you here.
Thank you. Thank you.
And we are missing Kenneth today. So Professor Hines, we know you had a family thing and we're missing you, and hope that we see you on Friday.
Yes. So yeah, good vibes out to Kenneth today. And I know we'll have him back because I know this was an interesting topic for him as well. So Brandon, welcome to the show. We'd like to bring you on and let you tell us a little bit about yourself, how you got into photography, what you've been doing now that you're not traveling, to keep yourself busy. But give us a little more information about yourself.
So basically, without having to go back too far, I did a little bit of photography in high school, black and white film. And then I got away from it for a little while, and it just seemed to keep creeping back into my life. And my wife kept buying me cameras because I think she knew it was a passion of mine. And I would say probably about 6 or 7 years ago, I put down everything else and went full steam ahead.
Awesome. That sounds terrific. And then, so you've been trying to work in a little bit of international travel as well, I see.
Yes, absolutely. The beginning of my international travel probably started with, I did a medical mission with Dr. David Beta. He does like Doctors Without Borders type stuff. And I was actually invited along to take some photos for a book. And I was ecstatic. I'd never actually been out of the country at that point, besides a couple little small trips down in Mexico. And I was hooked. I spent 16 days in Kenya in some very remote locations with some lovely tribal people, the Maasai people. And we did a little bit of safari while I was there as well. But it was really the interesting culture and everything that just drew me in, just sucked me right in. And I'm like, all right, this is what I want to do. This is exactly what I want to do.
Awesome.
So how do you decide where you want to target as far as photographically, where you want to go and travel and photograph?
So there's a few things. A lot of my avenues came from, and I'm going to throw in a plug here. There's a company called The Giving Lens, and it's owned and operated by Colby Brown, and Kate really behind the scenes does a lot of the work. But what they do is they incorporate a little bit of travel with also learning photography, and they also incorporate giving back. So there's always that. You may be teaching young children in a remote village, and these are children that have like done well in school and that sort of thing, and that they've been chosen to then get to take this photography class. So we'd spend a couple days photographing with them, and then the other days we get free to do what we want. So a lot of those locations came from me traveling with them. And then oddly enough, just randomly, when I'm on Instagram and I see a place or a photograph of a person, a place or whatever, I look at the location and I instantly just start researching and going, okay, that looks beautiful. How do I get there? What's it going to take? What am I going to see? And I just go backwards from there.
I'm curious. So I've not done this. I've never, and you said something initially, I think one of our conversations together about travel tour photography, and I told you I'd never done that before. So tell me, what the process is. How do you plan this? Where, I mean, you just a little bit on how you decide where to go, but I really am such a novice, and I'm so fascinated because I'm loving what I see from you.
It's a lot of take from those that have already done. So that sort of thing, asking a lot of questions and tapping into a resource of someone that knows that side of it, the planning and all of that, more than they do, say, any photography. So if as much as you can take that off of your back, the better you are. For example, the Morocco trip that he was speaking of, I used a tour company called Open Doors Morocco. They're beautiful people, beautiful people, and they really want you to have an enriched experience. And I think, are you pulling up some of the images
I
of?
am.
He is.
Yeah.
He's got the image of you leading the or the, not you, but somebody leading the camels, which I think was the image we used on our promos, and it's
Yeah,
just
yeah.
a
That's one of my
stunning black and
favorites.
white
Yeah.
image. Yeah.
We spent 10 days in Morocco, but the tour group really plans a lot of it out, and you let them know exactly what you're looking for and all of that. I crammed a 10-day a tour trip, into 6 days of a scouting trip. So I went and I actually brought a videographer friend along with me beforehand and scouted out exactly where we were going to stay, what times we were going to be where, at what location, based on light and the time of day and all of that stuff, just to narrow down. And I took notes every single minute of every single day of what we were going to see and what we'd expect. And that book travels with me during the tour. So therefore, I know what's coming and I can prepare my group for that in the vehicles or whatever it may be.
Do you do that every time? Do you do the scouting trip beforehand, or was it just because it was a location you weren't familiar with?
The scouting trips, usually overseas, they pretty much have to be done. There's just too much unexpected, and you don't want to seem unprepared or any of that. And
so the tour group's not handling that. You're handling that. You're going and looking at that in advance.
No. So a lot of times if you pair up with a tour group and you tell them, like, this is what I'm doing, I'm bringing 10 people, I'm bringing 8 people, I'm bringing whatever, they'll give you like a discounted rate or something like that for your scouting trip, if that makes sense. And
It does.
you can bust through it, and you're not going to stay at the high end hotel on your scouting trip. You're not going to, and you may even skip a night of a hotel and travel or whatever, have a driver. You cram it into a tight time span. And then
you have a fan club already. They're chiming in.
Yeah,
You're getting
all your OG crowd from Texas is popping in there.
well. Now there's Brooklyn, New York in here,
I know,
and
we got some New
Hey,
Hampshire.
guys.
We got a little bit of
Portsmouth,
everything, and we have a
yeah.
Brunei as well. So we're international today.
Yeah. So hi, y'all. Welcome to the conversation. Please.
Thanks, guys, for watching.
Contribute. I'm trying to, if you see me looking down, I'm trying to listen to Brandon and keep up with your comments at the same time, so I can make sure to ask him your questions. So, but I like that you're not just trusting somebody else. I see a lot of photographers that plan these things, but they're trusting somebody else to do all of the groundwork, and they're not doing them themselves. So you're doing that yourself. And I'm guessing that helps you better teach, so you know what you're leading them to do as you're working with how many photographers do you typically take?
It depends on the vehicles. So I usually pack a vehicle. 7 is the right amount. And you have a driver. So, and I would never really want more than 7 on my own. If I had a second leader, then we can look at going to possibly like 10 or so. But when you get much more larger than 10, you start to overwhelm the communities and the villages and things that you're going into, especially with the street photography and markets and things like that. You've got that many cameras, and if you don't break into like 2 groups or something, it can be very overwhelming, and that's something you definitely don't want to do for the people that live there.
So, I'm always happy if you need a second photographer. You just let me know. I'm happy to come and help you with this.
I will put you on that list, I promise.
What kind of things do you teach, or do people expect to learn when they go on these trips with you?
Do I teach, or what do I teach?
What do you teach? What do the people that go on to the trips with you, what's their level of experience? What do What do they expect to get out of this?
Well, basically, I'll take anybody that's willing to learn and understand that protecting people's privacy and that sort of thing. But I'll take about anybody at any level. Uh, I cater to the individual on these trips and what they want to get out of it individually, because we're all at different levels, whether we're pro, we still have things to learn, or we're amateur, we have things to learn, and they're different. So, and if I don't know the answer, I'm perfectly honest and say, you know what, I don't know. And if there's somebody else that's actually in the group or on the tour that is better than that, I say, hey, if you want to show them, it's that getting along, kind of that family niche type atmosphere um, that I like to create, and hopefully they get more out of it that way.
I know I look like I'm crazy. I'm in South Georgia and there is a gnat in front of my face. So I'm like batting the gnat and I'm like, everybody's going to think I'm nuts and I'm trying to ignore it.
Better than a murder bee, right?
Well, we live below the gnat line. So, I mean, you could do a travel tour down here. We're like a third world. So we live below the gnat line. So it's like everything below Macon that doesn't really get cold enough to kill the gnats over the winter. So we get a lot of gnats, and one of them is flying around my face right now. So, hey, gnat. It's like that crazy lady that's like grabbing at air.
So I was looking through. I'm looking through the pictures that you sent me, Brandon, and some of them you tell such a fantastic story within the frame. I mean, there's so much going on. One in particular that I was looking at is this gentleman here who was kind of sitting on the edge of a bed, and there's just there's so much depth going on. How do you get the subject to bring you into into their home and into their lives such that you can capture that emotion?
So he's actually, that gentleman of the picture that you have brought up there is in what's his temple. So his job basically is to monitor and watch and guard the temple, and he sleeps there, he eats there, and he's on a rotation with others that are in charge of that temple. But I think what you're asking, I really believe in the human connection, and where some street photographers, which like Kenneth likes to capture the moment silently, be in the background,
fly on the wall.
Yeah, exactly. And there's absolutely nothing wrong with that. In fact, it's a style that I do probably 15% of the time. But the rest of it, especially out of the country, I like to make the camera second, the human connection first. So I try to speak at least one or two words, try to learn that ahead of time of their language. Um, the smile goes goes a long way. It's universal.
Right.
And yeah, and then places like India, things like that, Morocco, the beard helps too. So I tend to compliment gentlemen and things on their beard. Oh, I really like your beard. And you get them comfortable, and then after you've had this interaction, you make it like a second thought. Oh, can I take your photo? And then they're a little bit more receptive. Plus, you've put them in more of a comfort zone. And I do this. I've taught a class in front of people, and I'll just run up to the first person that's sitting in the front row and just take their photo without saying anything to them and everything. And then I'll have a conversation with them, ask their name or whatever, and then I'll ask, "Can I take your photo?" And then show the two photos. And the first one, they're so guarded, they're not being themselves, they're not relaxed, and
right.
Yeah, like the photo right there. This gentleman is so suave. Uh, I absolutely I love this photo, and it's about having that conversation, telling him how cool he is, and him smoking, and he had this beautiful staff, barefooted, and it was a great conversation first, and then when he felt so cool, and that's when he sat back and relaxed and brought his cigarette up, and I was able to capture who he really was at that point. And there's moments when people say, well, yeah, what about when you want to capture the photo of them doing something, like in the act of that? If you interrupt that, then you don't get it. And I say, once you've had a conversation with them, you get a rapport, you take their photo. It may not be the one you want. Then you back up. They'll go back to doing whatever it was they were doing because it's life for them. They're,
Right. They're going to ignore you after a moment.
exactly. And now you've already got their permission to take their photo.
Right.
They don't care that it's after that first photo. And also, a lot of these people, they may have never seen a good photo of themselves. So I generally, on that first photo, will run a little bit of a higher ISO because I like to underexpose and bring up the shadows later on to get that really high detail in the shadows. And I don't want to blow out my highlights. And so I shoot to the left. And that makes it hard when you show a person the back of your screen. They're like, oh, it's kind of dark. Like,
so you're underexposing.
yeah, I underexpose by a stop or so on a lot of
Okay.
my street photography. And then, so I've learned that when I show them the back of my camera of a proper photo that I'm going to later on edit, they go, it's okay. It's kind of dark. You know, like they don't say that, but I can see in their face. So a lot of times that first initial photograph, I'll bump the ISO real quick, take a photo that I will not use later on. And they smile and, oh, thank you. Then I step back, let them go to do what they're doing, or maybe I adjust myself for better lighting or whatever, smile, watch whatever they're doing for a little while, then pull my camera up and get that photo that I originally wanted in the first place. And
You shoot Sony, don't you?
yes, absolutely.
I wonder if there's a way to change one of the buttons. This is a total aside, to just brighten the screen. I'm sorry, I have to.
No, you can actually jump over to auto. And 9 times out of 10, your camera's going to overexpose on auto. It's the number one mistake that most people that are shooting on auto. It's like, oh,
yes. Yeah, it's like we have to have control of everything. So I have loved the interaction that you're getting in some of the images, and I love that you are actually talking to them and engaging them, because I think that makes such a different image than the kind of the fly on the wall.
Yeah, and I'm trying to do, especially with the climate that we're in now, engaging with people actually here in our own country, I find a lot more difficult. And I don't know what it is. I guess we're a nation of suspicious people. They always assume someone's up to something, and so it's a lot harder. So I understand like Kenneth's approach, and being the.
Well, it's just a totally different. It's a totally different approach. But I like that you can communicate with the eyes. You can see things going on in their heads, and you're not doing that if you're a fly on the wall. You're doing that because you're engaging them. And so I like that I'm seeing that the engagement in your photography.
Yeah, and don't get me wrong, I worship Kenneth's stuff.
Right, this has nothing to do with Kenneth. That's totally different.
I'm actually hoping to, when this is all over, get together with him, because I want to learn some of the things that he does, and and I hope it goes full circle, because I've been watching his stuff for a long time, and
he's pretty cool. It's just a whole different genre, I think, than what you're doing. So, because what you're doing to me is you're bringing like the world to us, and not just environmentally, but you're making a connection with the person in front of your camera, and you have to do that by having some kind of communication with them. Are you using a translator?
A lot of times the tour, like if you are hooked up with the tour company, they speak English, believe it or not, is spoken in more countries than, we're the country that for whatever reason, I like to say I was brought up a complete moron, because I can't speak a second language, and it drives me insane. If I could go back, that's definitely one thing that I would have done, is at least taught myself a couple other languages. But luckily, a lot of the other countries and things like that, they do speak. There is someone. Learning English is their way of raising their economic value in the workforce.
Gotcha.
And so there's not always, but a lot of times there is somebody. But that's also going back when I said, find a place you want to go and backtrack from there, do research, learn those handful of words. And for me, they go in one ear, and I spend time there, and I get really good at it, and I come home and it all goes away until I return to that location or whatever. So
That would happen to me too.
yeah, I don't think I'm ever going to learn a second language fluently. I wish, but I don't think so.
So first of all, Robbie, you could absolutely be my elder statesman. No worries. I'm good with that. So Robbie is asking, do you leave any photos behind with your subjects? Which I think is a really interesting concept, and one that Tony and I had about a project that I wanted to do or still want to do. So are you doing that? Are you leaving photos behind with them?
Tony, do you have the photo of, I think it's a black and white from Morocco. There is a nomad woman in a tent. She's holding a Polaroid.
Let me get it here for you.
Okay, while he's looking for that, I'll go ahead and say it's something that I'm going to start practicing more of. And I have taken photos of individuals that I've gone back to that location. But I should practice more of what I preach about, and that is, I do highly recommend getting, and I've actually purchased one since my last trip, a portable printer, so to speak. And yes, I think the photo's up now. So this was a nomad woman, and basically she's sitting in her tent in the Sahara Desert, and they live with virtually almost nothing, but yet they're a happy people. It was by far one of my favorite parts of that particular Moroccan trip. And there's a young girl too, Hesna, her daughter, which you won't see any photos with, out of respect for her. Um, but anyway, the man standing over her shoulder is my friend Saeed, and we gave her a Polaroid of her and her daughter. And it was actually a Polaroid of another person that was traveling with me. He took the photo and gave it to her, and I was able to capture just pure joy on her face of receiving that image, and her good friend Saeed standing over with his smile. And this is one of those circumstances we were talking about earlier about, if I took something in black and white. We may have been talking about it before we went live, but we were talking about taking images in black and white versus color. And sometimes you wouldn't, because it would look, it would diminish the product. And so I captured this in black and white, in RAW, but I knew what I was going for. And the blown out section and Saeed looking almost angelic, like standing over her shoulder,
But yet he's not distracting.
was all intentional. Yeah.
Right. I love the way you've done this, because he's blown out, but it's so that he's not distracting, so that he's not too much background. There's so much thought and intent with what you've done there. And I can really appreciate that. But I'm loving her expression looking at the photograph, and it's making me go back to that project that Tony and that you and I talked about last year. And just like and it's making me even more emotionally want to do that, go out in communities and give them portraits of themselves when they can't have them. So I think that that's a fantastic idea. I know that that's something that you haven't really been able to do yet, that it's something that you want to do. So in the past, have you found yourself, do you pay them? Do you give them trinkets? Is there something else that you've done to compensate them for their time, or is it all just goodwill?
So that's a very fine line, and it depends on your community, and you have to um, rely on those that are helping you in that environment, whether it's your tour or whatever. And there are circumstances where that is people's jobs. For example, a couple years ago, I got the cover of a Digital Photo Pro magazine, and it is. Do you have the Hookah Man, Tony? It's it's
Okay.
a man in Jaipur, India, and he's in the fort in the top, and he sits there, and that's his job. So paying him is what it's all about. But the problem with sometimes, if it's just street photography and you end up paying somebody, you can open yourself up to crime. You can, there's a healthy balance there, and it's sometimes hard to find. Sometimes it's obvious. Children, never, ever, ever do I pay. I give candy, nothing. Now it may go through their parents. It may be something that we've organized ahead of time, and the parents are okay, and we give the parents, or whatever. And total communication, always open communication when it deals with children. But the reason behind never giving children product, candy, money is because those children, especially during the week, in the middle of the week or whatever, they're supposed to be in school. And when they're not, and they're making little trinkets that you absolutely love, and you would love to buy this handmade camel out of camel hair that this child made, you can't, because if they can make money on the street, they won't
They
go
won't
back
go
to
to school. Yeah.
And so it's very important. And I preach that to my tour group, that like, you know, this is somewhere where we don't do, and this is something that we can do. And it's just a balance that either every location or the entire location may have a certain set of rules.
No, I think that's very valuable. I know a lot of times if I'm out testing gear and like Atlanta Centennial Park, that some of the people that I will try to shoot or approach to shoot will quickly ask me for money. So I just didn't know in a foreign culture how that went.
Yeah, it's difficult because you want to, you know,
that shot is on the screen, by the way,
of the
hookah.
I'm
Oh.
not sure, but
but there is a shot on the screen. We're not.
No, that's the gentleman in he's in a tool shop, I believe, is up there. Yeah.
That's
yeah,
pretty though.
I found
Nice
that
shot.
there's so much going on in here. It's just it's an amazing collection of stories within the frame. It's just beautiful.
And
so it's not the shot that you intended, but it's the shot we like. So
the story behind this, the gentleman on the right gave me a no, I don't really want my picture taken. And so this is the advantage of having a wide angle lens. I didn't do anything deceptive because he's not the focus. He is in my shot because I'm using a wide angle lens, most likely the 25, my beloved 25. But he's still in the shot because I think it told a little bit more of the story that this man wasn't alone. And this was a shop of others, you know, a gathering of, you know, of things in a place. And so I still put him in there, but he's not the subject. And the other gentleman didn't mind having his photo taken.
So David is one of our regular viewers, and we love him. He comes to us from Hawaii, and he is asking you about your gear. What is your preferred camera, and what are your preferred lens choices?
I'll start with glass because, as far as I'm concerned, that's most important. From top to bottom, my favorite lens is the Bodice 25, and then the Bodice 85. And then I've been enjoying the 40. And the only, I own one Sony lens. It's a 200 to 600 that I shoot wildlife with. Otherwise, it's strictly ZEISS. I'm currently shooting the A7R4, and that was mainly for the megapixels and being able to also shoot in crop, which allows all of my lenses to have a second focal length. If that makes sense to some.
It does because
yeah.
then you're cropping in camera instead of in post.
Right, and it allows me to then maybe get rid of some distraction right away that's in the scene, because I'm not as mobile as I want to be maybe in that moment, and I have that set to number 1, and that's crop and not crop, and I go from 60 in the R4. I go from 61 megapixels to 26. Before in the R3, it went to 18, and for me, it just wasn't enough to utilize that feature as much. And I don't currently have my A9 anymore, but I miss it dearly. I'm probably going to either get an A9 II or go back to another A9. There's just something magical about it. And yeah, I absolutely love the 6400 as well. But the 66 would probably be a better choice. 66 at Sony A6600 would be a better choice because of the battery. That's just it.
Gotcha.
I don't want to have multiple batteries, and that old battery is crap compared to the new one. The new one just blows it away.
Yeah, I'm finding with my A7R4 that the battery life is not bad. It's not as good as what I'm used to on the Nikon, but it's not really bothering me either. Greg Waterman has chimed in and just said beautiful work. So Greg is one of our ambassadors, and
thank you. Yes,
we love Greg. So that's
very
quite the
well
compliment.
Greg Waterman. Yeah. So thank you very much, Greg. I appreciate that.
I just really am loving your work. So you normally, which lens is normally on your camera when you're out shooting?
25.
What is the 25? So if you're using the 85 or the 40, you have to, are you using more than one camera, or are you changing the lens as you need to?
I'm actually glad you asked that. I put constraints on myself, and I've actually taught this, and I learned it from someone I admire deeply, which is David Dushman. I don't know if you're familiar with his work, and it's about applying constraints to a theme. So when you head out for a day, you decide, okay, today I'm going to try to capture, if it's here in New York City, I'm going to try to capture people jumping over water puddles, crossing the street, whatever. I'm gonna start with a theme, but now I'm gonna put a constraint against it, which means I'm only gonna shoot with my 25, or I'm only gonna shoot with my 85, or I'm only gonna shoot in black and white. You can have one constraint, you can put two constraints, but I feel like creativity works better when it has something to push against. And I'm not a big firm believer in the lens swapping. Occasionally, yes. When I do have more than one camera body, right now I'm down to one. I'm not happy about it, but I am. When I have multiple camera bodies, I will put 85 on one and 25 on the other, and that's the way I'll go. But you're going to miss shots. You have to let that go. It's going to happen. It makes no difference. Pay attention to the ones that you're getting and the ones that you want, because the others don't matter. And it also gives you an excuse to go back to a location, especially when it's, out of the country.
We've got this gorgeous shot up right now, it looks like, of the downtown New York area.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, really. And Tony just swapped out another. Were these both with the 85? I mean, with the 25?
Actually, no.
Because these look like the 40, maybe.
This is actually the Milvus 21.
The 21, they're even wider?
Yes. So I shot that with the Milvus 21 with the Sigma MC11 on my Sony R4. Tony was kind enough to make that happen, and
I was using one on Monday for a little while.
Yeah, they're fantastic, and I thoroughly enjoy. I actually, because my bodice are all autofocus, I actually do about 60% auto, 40% manual focus, even with the bodice. And sometimes I use the DMF and do a little both.
Right. I love the DMF. I love that feature, because then you can quickly come to focus, but then you can adjust pretty.
Yeah.
I mean, it's just a real smooth. I have to tell you though, I put the Otis 100 on the Sony on Monday and shot at a wildlife refuge. And the detail, I got home and looked at them, and I'm like, holy crap.
I can imagine. Yeah.
This is amazing. I was really stunned.
It's a beautiful piece of glass. Yeah.
Paired with the A7R4, I mean, I'm shooting hundreds of feet away from these birds, and the detail I got on the birds just really blew me away.
Yeah. I've got to put my ZEISS on with my wildlife a lot more often, and having the R4 now and being able to punch in a little closer is, definitely going to suit that.
So back to where you're picking to go, what makes you decide to go someplace? Is it like a romantic longing to see this kind of photograph? Is it a humanitarian? You want to document it? What excites you about going to different locations?
A lot of times I don't have a lot of expectations about any location in general. I like to arrive and see what it reveals to me. But you still have to choose to get on a plane and go there and all that stuff or whatever. So like I said earlier about Instagram, it's seeing other images that inspire me to possibly go, I wonder what I can get out of that, or what can I capture that's, maybe seems different, but it's in that location. And so a lot of times that's what inspires me to go to those places.
And the photographers, you said that they're like every level. So what kind of things do you teach when you're with them?
Everything from the basic exposure triangle to composition. Um, you know, I heavily use the rule of thirds,
Mm-hmm.
but then I also to inject emotion will break some of those rules on purpose. But I feel like you have to know the rules first,
Right.
so you know why you're doing something. So I teach a lot of that. I do teach a lot of people that are uncomfortable with engaging with others. When you're out, I have a I have a tattoo on the inside of my arm that says, "If you don't capture the moment, it'll be gone forever." And I did that. It's not the most eloquent quote or anything, but I did it on purpose because it has gotten me into positive situations so many times because I second guess myself, or I'll sit back and say, "Oh, I'm uncomfortable." And then I realized, look, you tattooed this on your arm.
You need to, yeah, that's the
Go,
definition of discomfort right there.
go capture the moment. Like you did this, like, and so you have to at least try to live by it at some, whatever. So that's heavily taught when I'm out and about with people, is just engage. The worst you can get is a no.
Um, my dad always used to say, if you don't ask the question, the answer is no. So I think that's what you have to push yourself to do. And then I studied with a fabulous mentor out of Boston named Arthur Rainville. And I love what Arthur always told me is push the damn button. He's like, if you see something, you better have a camera, you better push the damn button.
Yeah, there's another one that says, what is it that, it's at the intersection of place, light, and moment that creativity happens. Like, it's that intersection. And so if you don't push the button,
Well, I think all of us have this introvert in us who sometimes is afraid to ask people if we can take their image. It's a hard thing to approach people and ask for permission to take their image. It puts yourself out there, and you're putting yourself out there for rejection. So it's hard for us all to put ourselves in a position where we can face rejection. But if we don't ask the question, then the answer is no, and we've missed our moment. And I think one of the things that I see in your images that makes them special for me is that you are engaging with your subjects. And I think the way that you interact is a really kind of special component. And
yeah,
go ahead.
I think that that started when I fell in love with the 25. It forced me to get closer, immerse yourself in that moment, in that situation. And so that's why I think I love the 25 so much, because it broke me of standing back and photographing that moment over there.
Right. You have to be
So,
closer.
yeah. I think he's got like this gentleman working in a bike tire shop, like I shot that probably with the 25, and I had to be right there, and I want my viewer to feel the same thing that I felt. And I noticed that getting closer did that.
And I don't know if you're familiar with a photographer by the name of Earl Newman, who was early in the last century or mid-century. But one of the things that he really is known for is being the father of environmental portraiture. That you put somebody in their surroundings and you can tell more of their story. And I'm seeing that a lot in your work with the 21 and the 25, is that you're able to tell more of a story. You're not just focused on the close-up of their face, but you're showing their environment. So the storytelling seems to be a really strong element for you. So what appeals to you as far as what stories do you want to tell?
I like to tell the average person doing what they do every day that may be completely different from what I do, or what anybody, my family, my friends, whatever. I like to bring that moment back home for others to see that may or may not get to travel. Maybe I inspire somebody to travel to that place. But it's kind of if you were, I don't know, like looking into a fish tank and imagining yourself scuba diving and being with the fish. And if that's silly
It
or what.
does. It really does. Because
And so,
that actually, I was about to ask you about that.
so that's what I'm trying to do. And it's purposeful. And yeah. And so I'm glad it comes through. And I do take straight on portraits. And oh, real quick, the image that's up, is it the young lady over the pot? Is that what's currently?
Looks like they're working on preparing food.
It's yeah,
Oh,
yeah,
okay.
it's several women in pink, and it's kind of like a down image looking down onto them.
The image that was before.
Okay.
Yeah.
Hang on, I'll find her. There she is. Yep.
Okay. So that image, I'm always striving to, okay, I'll admit it. I don't like to edit. I don't use Photoshop. I may use Photoshop to blemish remove. But I use Lightroom and I try to edit as little as possible. With this image, this is to date the only image, excuse me, that I didn't edit. It went straight through as is. And I don't know, I'm very proud of this one. And it's because of that, everything, the histogram was the most gorgeous histogram. And so it came through that way. And I really love that one.
Well, you should, because it's a beautiful, beautiful image. I really love it. I love the way you tell stories. And we talked a little bit earlier about just that brief comparison to what Kenneth does with pulling back as a fly on the wall. Do you find that as you're trying to decide what story you're going to tell, do you do the observation before or after you've made the contact?
It happens usually, I make the observation beforehand. I would say 80% of the time. The camera is not right here. I don't use a strap. I hate them because I can't get in positions that I like to be in. With the flip up screen and things like that, I absolutely despise straps. And also, I've seen way too many people think they have their strap on their neck or whatever and just let go of their camera. I never let go of that camera when I'm out. So I lost my train of thought. Oh, and so I typically will stand back, camera down, whatever, and just observe and watch, life happen. And it's when something just, makes me feel like, look at that moment, or whatever, then that's when the camera either comes out if the individual is not paying any attention or whatever. And that is when I say those moments that I capture. But I would prefer engage with them and find, maybe I don't know what they're making. Maybe she's making bread. Maybe she's making soup. Maybe she's cleaning her clothes and it looks like soup. I don't know, so that's where I engage. And when I know more about the story and I've spoke with them, now I can step back and maybe that first photo is the perfect one. But if not, now I have a second opportunity to capture that moment,
And you were saying that frequently, if you wait long enough after they've made contact with you, they'll go back to what they were doing before. So you have the opportunity to follow through and take that original shot again, because usually they'll put themselves back into that scenario.
Yes. And maybe that original shot, I liked better what was going on, but maybe, like I said, the lighting wasn't better or my position wasn't as good. So at that point, I can get into that position. I can look at that light.
Because they know they're being observed. So they're expecting you to walk around a little bit.
Yeah, they don't care anymore because they're like, oh yeah, that's that guy I just talked to.
He's good. He's friendly. I'm good with him.
Yeah, we smiled and whatever, and he asked to take my photo and he was kind.
I love the image that's on the screen right now because I love your low camera angle, and I don't often shoot that way, and I think it's really cool. And I love the way that, because you are shooting a little wider than I shoot, the distortion is kind of really neat.
That's I shot about probably 10 images of him, but it all started with him standing, and the gentleman on the right was helping him, and then there was a guy standing there getting his bike worked on the street. Like they had welders and stuff just strung out there on the street, and we asked him what he was doing, and he spoke through a translator. I'm fixing a bike, this and that and whatever. Oh, can we take your photo? Sure. Took his photo, and then he went back to doing what he was doing, and I squatted down to his eye level and was just watching him. And I was watching the weld light his face up like it was, like you were in a strobe, like you had a strobe, and it was the perfect scenario. So I'm like, okay, now how can I bring it in? And that's when the lines of the bike, I just dropped the camera down and flipped my screen up and let it right into his face.
Well, it's a very cool, well done image. I really enjoy it. And we talked a little bit about the contrast, and you were talking about how you did that on purpose. You were making sure that the density was what you wanted to shoot. Tell me a little bit about when you decided to go black and white versus color.
Like earlier when I was saying, I pick a constraint possibly. And that might be that day. I'm just like, you know what? Or sometimes when I get frustrated, and, we all, it's not like I run out and all my images are great and everything works perfect every time I pick up my camera. None of that happens to anybody. So, when I
beg your pardon.
Well, except for you, Tracy.
I'm just kidding.
It's usually that where I have to change something up, like this isn't working, or I make the decision that day. Or in the example of I had the Morocco trip, I had done that trip once, and so when I came back to do it a second time, that's when I chose to shoot in black and white. I'm like, look, Morocco is fabulous colors, so try something different. And that's when I shot like that entire series in black and white of Morocco. And I think it brought out something completely different. So I'd been there, done that. So I changed it up. That's when, one of the times when I made a decision.
Yeah. I mean, there's so many color images. So doing black and white gives you something different. So where is next? Where do you still want to go and photograph?
So before COVID, I was trying to put together a scouting trip for Vietnam.
Mm-hmm.
And there was the Giving Lens I spoke about earlier. They were going to do a scouting trip to Fiji, and I was going to jump on that if I could, but didn't happen. I have a friend that wants me to co-lead in Iceland, which is very simple to do because it just offers so much, a lot of landscape, and but I would have to say next may be Alaska, because it's still in the US, but it's like its own world. So I don't know. I honestly don't know. I didn't plan a lot for this year because I just moved to New York in December from Texas. And so knowing that was coming, I didn't plan anything. And thank goodness, because it just would have been a mess. So so I'm happy for that. So my slate is wide open. Where you want to go?
Oh, I want to go to Central America. I really do. And maybe Vietnam is something that really is interesting and captivating me right now. I think it's because one of my dearest friends is Vietnamese, and I'm just really fascinated by her story and her family story. Her, she's a MD, and her sister's an engineer, and I mean, they all moved. I think said she was 11 when they moved here, and they've just done so well. And she worked her way through medical school as a nail tech.
Oh, wow.
And I'm just really, and I'm meeting a lot of people who are moving here and working in those industries and then dispersing. And I just kind of want to go see the environment that they're moving from. But the other thing that I'm really interested in is I want to do here in our own country. I want to travel around and do some immigrants. I want to do an immigrant story, just to put real human faces to immigrants. And this is where I'd had a conversation with ZEISS last year about taking some portable, which is something that I think would be great for you, taking some portable printers, a battery operated printer, so that we could leave them with their image.
Absolutely.
And I mean, I just think, taking that image and then leaving them with that image, because I think in many cases, people have never had a portrait of themselves or their child or their family members. And I want to do that here in this country. So if you want to go with me, let's go. Let's plan it.
It's already in the works, right, Tony?
Absolutely. Yeah, no, there's a it's really all about the storytelling in the frame and having an overarching um, uh, focus like an immigrant story or embedding as you go through the country. That really lends itself to the other aspects of what you're talking about. We could leave a photo with them, we could tell their story, and it starts to build itself into a pretty excellent series of that you can put together.
So that shyness in me needs a partner to go do that. So if you want, well, let's plan it. Let's go. I mean, I want to tell these stories.
I'm in.
Okay.
I have the printers
You guys
too.
heard
We
it.
just have to get we'll get a 12-volt battery and an inverter, and we're good to go.
It's absolutely. And so I love, because that's the feel that I get from your travel photography is the stories that I want to tell here in this country and in a few countries that I'd like to go visit. I see you telling those stories and making those human connections, and I love the emotion and the connection and the integration that you're capturing. I think it's really well done.
Thank you. Yeah, I've tried I'm trying to push myself to do more of it locally. And with the current climate, it's definitely, going to force me to make that happen. And so I love that you said that, that's something that you want to do. And yeah, seriously, let's.
We have some wonderful people volunteering to be translators too. So.
Like I said earlier, I'll need it.
Yeah, me too. I mean, I can say a few words in Vietnamese because Thai has been forcing me to. Her name is Thai Huang Nguyen, and she's been forcing me to learn a few words here and there as I'm trying, and then the Thai restaurant near me, they've been teaching me a few words in Taiwanese, so I've been trying that also, but I have no ear for language, so I will definitely need help. So I'm glad you guys are all in, because I will need you.
We need somebody. Yeah.
So I can say thank you now in Vietnamese, and that's about it. And I'm not confident enough to say that online right now. So I'll say thank you afterwards. She makes me say it a few times, but I'm getting better. So I'm trying. So I know on your website, you say that you started as an enthusiast and now you're a professional. So what made you, what passion pushed you to want to take this particular path with your photography?
It kept resurfacing in my life. Like I said, I had cameras in high school and I did, that sort of thing. And then I had a huge falling out with my art teacher and I stepped away from it for a long time. And then my wife ended up buying me a camera and I used it till it broke. I had it on auto, thought I was fantastic, and I wasn't. And then I broke it and I stepped away for a long time again. And then we had our first child and my wife bought me, I want to say it was a Nikon D90.
Yeah, I have the D40X, so I have the predecessor.
There you go.
The D60, and yeah. My husband still uses it because he refuses to change.
So I had that until I broke it, and then I stepped away again, and then I got a camera. I'd been telling my wife that I wanted a new camera for Christmas one year, and so once again, she bought me another camera, and I said, I'm going to learn.
Just feeding your habit.
Everything. I'm going to learn everything I can about this. Like before I buy a new lens, before I do anything, before I upgrade, whatever, I'm going to learn this camera inside and out. And then I think in doing that, I was never able at that point to step away, nor did I want to, because it was, I guess I learned my craft, well enough to know that the passion was already there. Now I have the knowledge and the skills, and it just flourished, from there.
So Tony, next time we talk about how hard I am on cameras and gear, I'm going to point back to Brandon because he's much worse than I am.
He's definitely put them battle tested.
Yeah, this is what I love about my current gear is they hold up to me. So, but you have broken a lot more cameras than I do, so you get the badge of honor there.
Awesome. Well, thank you, Brandon. I appreciate the conversation today. I'm glad we had you on. Certainly, there's a lot. There's a lot to be learned. A lot of bringing your passion to the frame that really has driven you apart from knowing the camera inside and out. But I really think that your eye and your creativity is only taken even further by your knowledge of the equipment, and that's really what we're seeing in the frame. It's really terrific.
Thank you.
Thanks again for being with us today.
Absolutely.
We're gonna close it here. I appreciate your time today. The conversation's been fantastic. We're gonna have to make sure that we follow you and keep you well supported on your other trips around the country and around the world, and even in your backyard. The bird photos have been terrific. Um, so, but
It's keeping me busy.
but yeah, but they're all terrific. They all you can see that there's something going on in there. The way you're composing your shots, and I really appreciate that. Thanks again to Tracy. I love having you here to moderate
Tracy.
and to ask terrific questions. I actually do have those printers, so we can absolutely make that happen when it's time to travel
We're
again.
all in. I'm excited.
So
I feel like a new buddy.
we'll put a little ZEISS roadshow together and make it all happen.
Woo.
So
Choo
thanks
choo.
again, everybody. And thank you for coming on and being with us today at ZEISS Conversations. We have another conversation about travel, this time about videography on Friday with Jason Vong. He's going to talk about a trip where he took some of our lenses over to Japan and actually put together a whole videography training session, if you will. So we're going to ask him all about that. But please do come back Friday at 3 p.m. Eastern. We'll be here and you can join us and learn about videography. Thanks again, everybody. See you later.